What is going on YouTube and Diablo fans? My name's Andreas, and as always, welcome back to Mana and Motherboards. So with Season 14 coming up this weekend, and with the Summon Tainted build for the Warlock being such an exciting prospect, it's been requested and asked that I do a little bit of a leveling guide and a build guide for the whole early game leveling process for the Summon Tainted Warlock and that particular build. So with that all being said and sort of with that in mind, let's jump into a hero edited level 25 Warlock that I have just made here, and we'll sort of take you through what gear you can expect to have or should be looking to make during the leveling process, as well as where you should be putting your skills and stats and all of that stuff. So if we just first of all have a look at the skills here, you can't use Summon Tainted until level 12. So what do you do until that point in time? So for your first level, or your first skill point that you put whilst you're leveling, you're going to want to put one skill point into Summon Goatman. So this will be your summon that you use as a tank, and you also use as a little bit of extra damage, and you will have a 1-2 Miasma Bolt weapon that you just get as default with your Warlock, and that will sort of carry you through the first couple of quests. And whilst you are leveling from level 1 to from level 2, because you've already been level 1 with your Summon Goatman, from level 2 to level 11, you're going to be putting your skill points into Demonic Mastery. And this is so that our damage and life and all of that other stuff that Demonic Mastery gives you will scale nicely once we can put our points into Summon Tainted. So we're going to put 1 point into Summon Goatman and the rest into Demonic Mastery until level 12. And then at level 12, we are going to use 4 points from level 12 until level 16 into our Summon Tainted, and this is just to, this is the main skill for the build, so you want to start putting points into that as soon as possible. And once you have got to level 16, and you should be roundabout at Radamant at this point in time, you can then switch over to your Eldritch skill tree and put 1 into Levitation Mastery, and that is because we are going to want to get to Blade Warp as soon as we can, as a bit of a mobility skill and a bit of a utility skill to better position ourselves and get around. So then once we have put 1 into Levitation Mastery, then at level 17 we're going to put 1 into Echoing Strike, and then once we are level 18 we can put that 1 point into Blade Warp in order to get our Blade Warp mobility skill. So then after that, at level 19 we will then put a point into Death Mark, so that at level 20 we can then put a point into Blood Boil, which is a synergy for Tainted, and that will give us better Tainted damage. And then from level 20 onwards we will put 1 into Sigil Lethargy, which is on our Chaos skill tree, and then we will put 1 into Engorge, so that we can also then just further help out our Blood Boil skill. So from that point onwards, you're basically going to want to do 2 skills into Summon Tainted, 1 into Blood Boil, so on and so forth, so that you can sort of boost your damage and your Tainted at the same time between these 2 skills, because Blood Boil does act as a very strong damage synergy to Tainted, but you also want to be putting points into Tainted so that it has more life, more defense, and all of that sort of stuff. So this is where you are going to sort of be at level 25 in terms of your skill points for the Warlock. So if I just have a look here, this is our Death Mark, we'll put that there. We will put Blade Warp as our F1, Summon Tainted, or actually Lethargy as F2, F3 Summon Tainted, F4 as Engorge. So like I mentioned, you'll be leveling up and using your Goatman until you get to level 12, at which point you will then use your summon Tainted and do the points as I have recommended and suggested them. So then in terms of stats, we've got 125 stat points that we can distribute how we see fit, and we basically don't need anything into dexterity. We just need a bit of strength for our gear, so I think 70 strength should be about right. Maybe let's just go with 75 just to make sure that we have enough here, and then the rest we will just stick into vitality. So that's basically what we're going to be doing in the early game, is basically 2 to strength, 3 to vite, 2 to strength, 3 to vite. Maybe in the beginning you might do a little bit more into strength just to be able to use the gear. Now for our gear, you should be able to make a stealth rune word by level 25 pretty easily, and this rune word has a lot of really good, really useful stats for the build, and in general it's just such a fantastic caster armor that you can use. Then next up for boots, you might have at this point in time found a Saigon Sabbath Greaves, which gives you that faster run walk as well as some cold res, which is always nice. Basically anything you can find for boots, even if it's just faster walk run speed boots. You might have a Saigon's Belt. We're going to make ourselves an Ancient's Pledge in a kite shield here. That's just roll or tull that you can get in Act 5 from your second quest from Qualkek, and this just gives us great resistances. You might find yourself a dagger with 2 to summon Tainted or 2 to demonic skills, anything like that. Gloves, just some resistances, vitality, things like that. It's really just anything you can find at this point. I did make a lore helmet, but I only realize now that you can only do that at level 27. So you're not actually going to be able to use a lore helmet until level 27, but that is what you're aiming for in normal, in the early game, and as you go on to Hell. Yes, you could also make a spirit sword at this point at level 25, or you could even use a leaf, and leaf will give you those 3 to fire skills, which is fantastic for this build. But unfortunately at the moment in the PTR at least, fire skills don't apply for your Tainted, so I'm just going to use this little dagger. You might find an amulet with 1 to warlock skills, and then you have your rings with just some resist and some mana and life, and then maybe you find a faster cast rate one, and that's sort of going to be what your setup would look like. We could buy any sort of helm from, let's just go to Act 4, Act 5 and look for a helm here and buy it for our character quickly. This is what your character is sort of going to be looking like, and we'll just show you what the gameplay is like at this sort of level and point in time. So yeah, we just have a helm with some defense, or is there, yes, faster hit recovery and lightning resist. So let's go and fight some demons and some monsters quickly and have a look at, sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So we're just going to quickly have a look at what this build is going to look like. Let's go Upper Kurust here. So we're going to summon our Tainted, and then we can move around. I actually should buy some potions quickly. Let me get on that. Yeah, so you have your 3 Tainted summoned. 3 Tainted or 4 Tainted? Why did I think 4 Tainted? I meant 3 Tainted, but I had only summoned 2. Let's just buy some potions here quickly. And then we can go fight. So what you can do is use your blade warp to get around. Here we have got some, as you can see, our Tainted do a fair amount of damage. You can also use Blood Boil if you need, but our Tainted are doing perfectly well just by themselves here, blasting away. So it's also a very safe build. As you can see, you can just run around and stay out of harm's way and just let your Tainted do the work for you. Let's quickly go to Act 5 to show you what this would look like in Act 5. And as you can see, the gear really isn't nothing spectacular, nothing special. It's stealth, Saigon's bolt, some random rings, random gloves, a Ancient's Pledge for some resist. All very attainable, very easy to get items here. So our Tainted are very strong. We can always lay down a Sigil Lethargy to just get some CC going on the monsters that we are fighting and just help us survive a little better. And you could also even do Sigil Death if you like in a couple levels time to just sort of up your damage output. But I think at this point in time, if you just have a look here, we are on players 8 difficulty. So I think this is a very fair kill speed for players 8. With a Warlock with this sort of gear at this level. I think it is quite impressive. It works very well. It will be a little less damage in Season 14 than the PTR because of the slight nerf from 30% damage from Blood Boil as a synergy to 20%. So if you look there, Blood Boil gives you 30% fire damage per level. That will be 20% in the Season 14, but I still think it's going to be very fair and very comparable. So let's just quickly change this up to players 1, and then we'll just show you what that looks like with this current setup. But overall, in the beginning, you just use your Summon Goatman, your 1 point into Miasma Bolt from that weapon that you start off with as a Warlock, and you will just get to level 12, and that's where you will really start to shine once you can use your Tainted. And the build works completely fine leveling up through Act 1 by yourself using your Goatman and whatever other items you find. And then as you progress and from level 12 onwards, you just really become a whole lot more powerful and a whole lot more effective. So if you are playing in a group up until level 12, that is quite helpful, but it is completely doable on your own by yourself. And as you can see on players 1 here, it is really no problem for your Tainted just to blast everything around you. No issues. It's kind of one-shotting everything, and as you can see, the projectiles pierce and go through the mobs, and it's just incredibly powerful. And you have your Blade Warp to get around, and it's just all around general a great playthrough, very safe, very hardcore friendly build. So if there are any questions on this early game setup, please put them in the comments below. What I'm going to do is quickly jump onto a level 71 Warlock that I've also set up, and this is in order to sort of simulate what Nightmare and the end of Nightmare and the beginning of Hell would look like for your Warlock. So if we just start off firstly with the skills, so as you can see at level 71, if you've done all your quests, you should have about 82 skill points to put into this build. So what we are going to do is put 1 into Sigil Lethargy. We can also use Sigil Death. I personally like to use Sigil Death. For your Eldritch skill tree, you just want 1 into Blade Warp so that you can get around and use your mobility as best as possible. Put 1 into Summon Goatman so that we can max out Summon Tainted. We then put 1 into Deathmark to get to Blood Boil, and we will max out Blood Boil. And we have our Summon Tainted and Blood Boil maxed out. We also want our Demonic Mastery maxed out. We want 1 into Blood Oath, and we want the rest into Engorge so that our damage per level for Blood Boil can be as high as possible to deal with fire immunes in Hell. So that is going to be the last skill that we sort of max out here before putting into Blood Oath right at the end. So we'll put up as many into Engorge as possible to just increase our physical damage portion of Blood Boil as much as possible to help us with immunes. So that is our skill setup for your early Hell playthrough, end of Hell, that sort of level of where you are with your Warlock at that point in time. So again, just for our skill points, what we're going to do is put in enough strength for our gear. We do want a Spirit Monarch at this point in time, so we're going to need 156 in strength, and then the rest we can put in. We need a little bit of dex there. I'll put a little bit into dex just for whatever items we may be using later on, and then the rest will go into vitality. So that is how we're looking. What sort of gear can we expect to have at this point in time? So again, a stealth rune word is something that we could and would have at this point in time. It's quite easily attainable and something you can get during normal nightmare, anything like that. You could also get an authority at this point in time. It's only a hull, shell, and roll rune, so that is a very powerful early game warlock skill because of those 2 to warlock skills on it. It's also got fire res and faster hit recovery, so very nice in general. You might just have a lore helmet, again 1 to all skills, 30 light res, very good. A Spirit Monarch, it's sort of your bread and butter for any caster class at this point in time. You might have a leaf in your main hand. We can't actually use a leaf because of the changes now, so you'd need a grimoire instead. So let's just put on a spirit sword and a spirit shield. Then if you're lucky, you could find a mage fist, or trangs. Any sort of gloves at this point in time is fine, but a mage fist is very cheap and very easily attainable, so I think you would be able to find that. You might just have a belt like a credendum with that 10 to dex, 10 to strength, all res, all of that kind of stuff. Good all-round low-level bolt. Then the Rising Sun amulet, 2 to fire skills. It's a very cheap, very easy to find amulet. Got some fire absorb on there. You might find a 10 FCR ring with some life and some res. That would be very cool. You also might find a mana FCR ring, something like that. And then for boots, it could be any magic, any rare boots you find. Water Walk, Horizon Set, Elders, Silk Weaves, any of these are cool, and you could find them along the way relatively easy. If you can't make a Spirit Shield, and maybe you're lucky enough, a lidless wall would also be fantastic. Maybe you find a Gloom's Trap Bolt. There's many options at this point in time, but this is very simple gear that we have set up there. And I'll just show you a little bit. Let's say let's just set up our skills here again. Let's just say that you are early in Hull or the end of Nightmare. This is sort of what your setup would look like at this point in time. So where can we go here? Let's go River of Flame, and we might encounter some immunes at this point in time, so we'll just see how that goes. But overall, if we have a look at our skills here, our demons are doing 6.5k damage each, so we do a fair amount of damage at this point in time. And as you can see on players 1, these enemies are just getting absolutely wrecked. Your Tainted teleport with you, and you also have what is that skill now? So you see that is a fire immune. What we can start doing here is using Blood Boil to then take out that fire immune very early on. So you do have that dual element to the build that is very useful and allows you to deal with immunities, which is very nice. And yes, this is on players 1. I can quickly switch that up to players 8 for us. But as you can see on players 1, you are absolutely ripping and wrecking through the enemies with this very entry level, very simple gear. So I think that this build scales very well into Nightmare and even into the beginning of Hull. We'll quickly just look at Hull after doing a little bit more of the chaos. So again, there we have those immunes. We will just use Blood Boil in order to take those out. And you can level nicely in the Chaos Sanctuary at level 70 in Nightmare from this point in time. We got immunes again. We are just going to use our Blood Boil. I didn't get any potions. I need to summon another one of our Tainted here. But you get the general idea. Nothing is really an issue for you. you can get by very easily. What I'm just going to do is change it to hull difficulty, and we'll just show you sort of, let's say you're an Act 2 hull at this point in time, and we'll just show you what that would look like on Players 1 for this Tainted Warlock sort of early endgame setup. So I think this build is doing fantastically. I think it's really cool for the playthrough, really strong, really tough, survivable, and just in general is a great build for the playthrough. I think there are a lot of fire immunes down here if I'm not mistaken. Let's just go Flare Jungle, maybe that's a decent spot. Let's even just go Act 1, Black Marsh, Tamo Highland. Out of place there. There we go. So let's show you in the hull what this Warlock looks like. As you can see, again, our Tainted are sort of one-shotting our enemies. Nothing too much of a problem here. So here we have fire immunes, so again we'll just use our Blood Boil to take those down. Teleport on top of them. We could also use our Death Mark to get more on top of these enemies without us being sent in. So I'll just actually put Death Mark as, let's say, a 5-year. So if you want to just send in your demons and then use Blood Mark instead of you teleporter or telestomping in with your on your own, you can also do that as well. But as you can see, immunes aren't really an issue, and you can just play through as it is right now. I'm just looking for the pit because it would actually be pretty easy to play in the pit with this build as well at this point in time. So you could start doing some pit runs, and you know, you shouldn't have too much of an issue with that. And again, you see there's an immune elite here, and no problem taking, sorry, I'm just getting my buttons mixed up there, but there's no problem taking down these immunes with Blood Boil because we have put our points into Engorge. And yeah, this build just deals with immunities pretty well. You could also get a lower resist wand. You could use an Act 5 mercenary with Plague, and I can't remember what the other weapon is that does lower resist, but there are some options later on as you progress in the end game to deal with immunities. So they are Blood Boil doing the work to get rid of those immune monsters. And I'll quickly just show you a couple other gear options as well, just to give you some ideas of what you can potentially use at this point in time for this build. And let's say you aren't using a Spirit Monarch shield, you can use a book or a tome, in which case you can then also use Leaf in your main hand for those extra fire skills that will apply in Season 14. So this is the pit here. I don't think there are that many fire immunes, there's only a couple, and again you have Blood Boil to deal with that. So you can make your way through here pretty comfortably, pretty easily, using your Blade Warp to get around, using your Blood Boil to get rid of those immunes. Oops. Well, that was my mistake, my bad. I'll just quickly save and exit and just show you that you can even do Players 8 with this current setup, this very budget, very sort of early game oriented setup with Summon Tainted. Changing Players to 8 quickly. Summon our Tainted. And I wasn't really making use of our sigils there, which also help greatly in terms of survivability and just getting rid of monsters quicker if you use Sigil Death. So there we have a fire immune, so we're going to use our Blood Boil It doesn't go too fast. Again, this is players 8 and we are not very geared at all. You shouldn't really find yourself in this kind of position where you are going to be doing players 8 with this build at this point in time, but as you can see, it still can deal with this level of content and this level of gear at this point in time. So I think this build is doing fantastically. Use a bit of our blood boil here for the immunities again, and if you're getting low in health on your tainted, you can just resummon them. You don't really need to use engorge at all to give them extra life. You just resummon them and that works easily enough. And when it comes to non-immunes, even at this point in time, your damage output on players 8 here for this sort of gear is very impressive in my opinion. So I'm just going to quickly go back to town and just show you a couple other options for gear. I don't have any scrolls of Town Portal with me at the moment, but that doesn't really matter right now. So let's just say you get to sort of the early end game sort of level. You can, let's say, change out your stealth for an authority to get a bit more damage. You can use a Heart of the Oak instead of Spirit. Maybe you find yourself a Shaco, something like that. That sort of gets you going in that early end game. We can't use a Rax yet, we aren't level 80, but maybe you find yourself a Geed's Bolt instead. So there you can see with that sort of gear, that will then up our damage for our Tainted quite substantially. So now we are doing about 10k damage per Tainted with slightly better gear. So let's just see where can we go where there aren't too many immunes. Canyon of the Magi, there are some immunes here, but not all that many. And we can just see what this looks like. So even on players 8, this this sort of level of gear does really well in my opinion. As you can see, a couple fireballs from your Tainted and the monsters are molting. If we change it down to players 1, we will really fly through this hull content at this point in time. So I think as a leveling build, this Summon Tainted Warlock is really fantastic, really strong, and has a whole lot of utility within its kit. You have the sigils, you have your mobility with the blade warp, you have your fire resistance aura from your Tainted, you have your sort of meat tanks doing the work for you, and it is a summon build, so you can stay in the background and stay safe out of harm's way and just let your summons do the work. And I think it's just a really powerful leveling build. It does really nicely. And just a shout out to Frog Mike, who did a lot of research on the sort of leveling tips and tricks for the Summon Tainted Warlock. He's a community member of the Mana and Motherboards community, and he did a lot of work helping out with sort of the tips and tricks for this video. So thank you very much to Frog Mike, and I really appreciate the help and theory crafting and other stuff that you have done in the background for this guide and this build. It's really much appreciated. And yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this one. I think the build feels great. What do you think just from looking at this video? I think it's going to be a fantastic league starter for Season 14, and it's going to scale really nicely into the late end game with some better gear. So just as an example, this is the kind of gear you could aim for and want later on in the season once you have leveled up a bit. An Obsession Staff, a 3-2 Demonic Skill Circlet, Enigma, a 3-2 Warlock or 3-2 Demonic Skill Amulet, Oz Torbalos, Mage Fist, Arachnid Mesh, Stones of Jordan, Wraith Step with plus to demon skills, your Demon Skillers, your Flame Rift, Sundered Charm, All Res Small Charms, Torch Annie, all of that sort of good stuff, a CTA, a Spirit, all of that. That's the sort of gear you can scale into. So I wish you luck for the season start. If you are looking at playing the Summon Tainted build, I think it is a fantastic option, And if you like this video and this form of content, please consider subscribing to the channel. That would be greatly appreciated. Any likes, shares, views, all of that good stuff is always appreciated. Join our Discord if you'd like to join our playthrough groups and our sort of league starting groups. And if you just want to be a part of the community in general, that would be fantastic. And we'll catch you again very soon for some more Mana and Motherboards. Cheers.